Glad to have you back. Now, since Mr. Oluyemi Cardoso took over as the CBN Governor, experts have been setting an agenda for the new leadership of the Apex Bank. According to them, Mr. Cardoso's biggest challenges would be reviewing rates, shoring up banks' limited reserves, and restoring confidence in the country's financial system. What more should the new CBN management be looking at? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Mr. Olumide Esan, tax partner and industry leader in energy resources at Deloitte West Africa, joins me via Zoom to understand this so more. Good afternoon, Mr. Esan. It's good to see you.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon.
I want to start with restoring confidence in the foreign exchange market. Everyone seems to be interested in this because that dollar exchange rate affects everyone. Everyone, I must say. So I think that is where everyone is looking at. And I don't think there's any magic that can be done about this. Please, make us understand how we can go about restoring confidence in that market.
Yeah, so it's really a good way to start. First, congratulations to the new CBN team, the governor and the deputy governors. So I think for the FX issue, everybody agrees there is no short-term fix. Remember, there's always the supply side and the demand side. We focused a lot of effort in the past to manage the demand side, but I think the bigger issue is around the supply side, which I think should be a priority, of the new management team. We need to diversify our exports to be able to earn more export proceeds in dollars. We have relied a lot in the past on oil and gas. And whilst we are not out of oil and gas, we also have, work to be done in the oil industry to bring our production back to what it used to be. At the time in this country, we used to produce 2.5 million barrels. You can imagine how much dollars, came into our treasury from royalties and taxes in the days when we produced 2.5 million barrels compared to today when we're hovering around 1.4 million barrels. So we need to fix the oil industry, and that will be part of the longer term fixing of the FX shortages we're dealing with. But besides, for non-oil exports, we need to focus a lot more on the SMEs to start to get their products across to Africa and the world indeed. Export-based incentives, industrial clusters, making our port an easy exit route for Nigerian products packaged for overseas. These are part of the issues that we need to deal with on the supply side, because if we fix the supply side, we'll be less bothered about the demand side. I think the other thing which is very important is the issue of psychology around FX. I'm happy the governor had accepted the fact that he needs to deal with the backlog demand, because if we don't fix the issue of the backlog, what tends to happen is everybody then thinks, oh, if I need FX in 1 year's time, I need to start looking for it now. And, that basically adds to the pressure on FX demand in the market. People who don't need it now, but are coming to the market now because they anticipate that it may take a year for them to actually get what they need. They help ramp up the pressure on Naira, and that is completely avoidable. If we can fix the backlogs, and then we start to work, systemically to fix what is wrong with the supply side, then we can start to move forward. That's what I would say. I know that over the years we've had different views. Some have said that we should just focus only on import substitution, but we live in a free world. People should be able to aspire to buy whatever they want to buy. So I think our focus should be towards actually increasing the scope for the supply side of FX. But at the same time, not forgetting to do a lot more, if you like, import substitution. But let's enhance the quality of what we produce in Nigeria and be able to export it around the world. And then we would have enough supply of FX in our treasury.
A good way to break it down there. But like we said, there are a lot of issues. So I'd like us to jump in and jump to inflation, which is also what the Apex Bank has been trying to use interest rates. Well, it's not just Nigeria, even abroad, that's what's happening. Everyone is trying to use interest rates to attack inflation, but it seems not to be working at all times. And we are far above 20 something percent at the moment. But I want to ask you, how do you expect, Mr. Cardoso, how do you expect to tackle this? We're talking about the supply side, the demand side. I know you can state this better than I do, but how do you see inflation not being an impediment to the actualization of his dream as a CBN governor?
Thank you. You know, the role of every CBN governor is to stabilize prices. So price stability is a very key target for every central bank. Of course, there are other important roles, including stimulating growth in the economy. Price stability, of course, revolves around inflation. Right now, we are trending 25.8. I think the thing to say is that unlike our peers and the advanced world, we had structural issues around the inflation we are dealing with. So we've had this issue of insecurity, in our food plain, in the north central and northwest now. So that has really impacted the price of food products. And again, know fully well that this is a significant part of the inflation basket. We also have the added issue around climate change, which we're now dealing with in form of flood, and desertification. So that also has added to, the structural issues that we have to deal with. Unlike others, when for most of them it was around, COVID recovery and energy prices. So when you now overlay the COVID issue and the high energy prices on top of our own structural issues, then we have an exacerbated situation, which is where we are now with inflation. Now, it's important to note that there is also a linkage between inflation and also FX, because what also happens also is this could also manifest in the form of imported inflation, really, which is like, because we import a lot of food from outside, finished and unfinished, canned and all of that. What happens is the FX rate tends to also influence the price of this food in our market. So inflation remains a big issue for us to tackle. I mean, some other countries have made progress. Inflation is starting to peak in a number of developed countries, even developing countries. US has peaked at 3.7, UK at 6.7, Germany at 4.5. In fact, for most of the G20 countries, is now trending downwards. Even Ghana inflation has dropped to 40.1. We still have issues. I mean, we are at an 18-year all high, 25.8. But that's not to say all hope is lost. I think one thing I've learned personally from the last 1 year or so is that we're never going to be able to achieve an inflation-busting interest rate or NPL. So I think we now start to look beyond NPL at other, and by addressing the fundamental issues driving inflation in Nigeria, we need to tackle insecurity. Anyhow we want to do it, I think we must have an integrated approach to resolving the issues of insecurity between the herders and the farmers, amongst other things. The issue around banditry, we need to address that. We need to spend significant amount of money on midstream infrastructure in the food value chain. Because, right now we still have seasonal, inflation, I would say, around certain food items. And that's easy to resolve if we have a very robust midstream, which is essentially about storage and transportation. Controlled atmospheric temperature and pressure could help preserve this food all year round. All year irrigation mechanism helps us to ensure that we can produce food, certain categories of food all year round. These are structural, I would say. These are peculiar to us. Doesn't affect the other countries that have to deal with energy crisis as we are dealing with, and also the issue of COVID. So we need to look inwards to fix those peculiar issues that we have to do, that has to do with Nigeria. And I think that, all the various parties in government who are concerned need to work together. CBN has a role, to support all the agencies. Schemes like the Anchor Border scheme may have its downside, but largely it's a positive scheme, really, because then it tends to encourage farmers. But I think beyond that, it's also addressing, how can we deal with, the issue of insecurity, because that has become, has only become bad over the years because we didn't take it seriously enough. So if we address these issues, deal with the structural issues we have that is driving inflation in Nigeria, I think we'll be able to bring inflation under control. I'm not of the school of thought that people should not buy goods made outside of Nigeria. No, I think on the other hand, what is manufactured in Nigeria should attain the quality outside such that people won't need to import things into the country if they can buy locally. If we're able to buy local goods, we would be able to stem, what I call imported inflation. Although I know that partly imported inflation is also as a result of inflation coming from other countries. But I know in our own case, FX is a factor in it. So the two are actually linked, and unfortunately, both are within, the purview of the central bank.
Interesting and brilliant stuff. I want us to go now and talk around that handshake between the fiscal and the monetary side. During the last administration, there were in some cases, some analysts identified that handshake wasn't as it should be, and there were arguments that there were supposed to be some discussions with both parties that at times they come out and say, no, I'm not aware of this. I'm not aware of this. So are you seeing that synergy, looking at the likes of Mr. Wale Edun, Minister of Finance, coordinating economy, and of course, Dr. Oluyemi Cardoso, who's the CBN Governor? Are you seeing that handshake and understanding so that we can all achieve inclusive growth, which is the ultimate aim of the administration?
So thank you. And before making any comments on, what the relationship is, I think it's established that, the two of them must work in lockstep. They must head towards the same direction, row towards the direction. They must interact on a daily basis. Between the two of them lies the economic fortune of over 200 million people. I think it's absolutely important that they have a structured way of working to see that they don't at any point in time work at cross purposes. So from what we've seen, of course, the early days for both of them, and more recently the central bank governor, but both the minister of finance and the central bank governor, even the chair of the FRS and other important government regulatory bodies must work together. They must roll together. If there is an initiative that has to happen, for example, if you look at the president commitment to CNG gas, for example, you will see that there will be need for CNG infrastructures across the country. One of the things we want to see is, for example, you see the CBN governor able to assist companies that are trying to set up, CNG plants across the country. That sort of synergy that we need in this new, administration, that the central bank governor is working and supporting the government towards achieving its objectives. The two must work together. Otherwise, we would have a repeat of what we had in that administration, which, of course, you and I don't want to go back there. So I think they've started on a good note. I expect that this should work better than what we had in the last administration.
The capital requirements for banks, looking at it over years, seems to have, well, if we look at it in dollar terms, as at the time it was 2 billion naira to 25 billion naira. And at today, if you look at 25 billion naira in dollars, it's about 32.5 million US dollars. But my question really is, do you think there is a need to revisit that, talking about the stability of our banks?
So I do think so. And I give you one example why that should happen at some point in time. I was in South Africa sometimes last year for a conference, and I met with a couple of other Deloitte partners there, and at a dinner, we're talking about capital projects and the fact that in Nigeria, most of these big projects are funded in dollars. And my South African colleagues mentioned that, oh no, most of the capital projects in South Africa are funded by South African banks in rands. That was speaking to how deep the financial system is. They could tackle projects worth $5 billion locally without need for an external bank to finance. So, and that speaks to the quality of capital that the banks have. And I think we must get to that point as well, because one of the advantages of having a robust and deep financial market is you no longer would need loans in dollars. I was shocked when I was told that, big power plants in South Africa were all, consummated and funded in rands, not USD. If we were Nigeria, it would have been funded in dollars. Reason being that most of the loans will come outside Nigeria, and the lenders will only be comfortable in signing the loan governance in dollars. Whereas you can imagine if it was Zenith Bank or First Bank or FCMB that was funding a major project for the government, and the loan is in naira. Of course, the currency of transaction will be in naira. The reason why which further puts pressure on our dollars is because the local market, financial market, is not deep enough. So whatever has to be done to encourage deepening of the financial system, the CBN governor must promote it.
Well, finally, I wanted us to touch on the ways and means financing fiscal deficits. It was an issue the last time. I see your smile already. What are you thinking around that space, and what's your outlook for the entire economy as we move on? The challenges are much. We see palliatives being introduced, also salary increases for government workers, at least for minimum 6 months and all of that. Let's wrap up on that note, Mr. So what's your reaction to all of this?
So first, I'm happy that finally the government and the Labour, they're getting somewhere. And I'm also happy with the fact that the interventions have a sunset date. Okay, so we don't start again where we cannot finish, just as we started this whole thing of fuel subsidy. I think that with the the deregulation of the prices of petroleum products, which by the way is in line with the extant provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act Section 205 on market pricing, there will be a lot more room for the government to execute its budget without recourse to loans. I mean, we all know there is a limitation to loans that the federal government could take, both based on the Fiscal Responsibility Act and also based on the CBN Act. So I think the Ways and Means thing, as it happened before, was an aberration. But I think what we need to ensure now is, as the government is making savings from the regularization of the petroleum downstream sector, and also unifying the exchange rates and stop subsidizing the FX rate at multiple rates, we will see increasing headroom from the government fiscal point of view and the subnationals as well. Already, you've seen that in the last 2 months, the FAC allocation has been more than $1 trillion. I recall, I think it was what they shared in May was about 635 or 675 billion, something like that. So you already see, almost like 50% increase in what was being shared. So what you then see is you would have, diminishing needs to actually go the way of ways and means. But quickly, governments must actually industrialize the country, because that's essentially what we need now. There's so many industries we had in the past that are no longer there. And I think the focus on the government is to look at these, specific industries and see what needs to be done to bring them back. Because when the industries are functional, you will have high employment rate. Those who are employed, they will have purchasing power. They will buy foods. By buying, they also are creating further wealth. In addition, they will be doing, the citizens' responsibility by paying taxes to government. So either way, industrialization is the way forward. And I know this is not achieved in the short term, but in the mid and long term, if government will be committed to this, we will see a new Nigeria.
It's been interesting talking to you. I've been speaking to tax partner and industry leader, Energy and Resources, Deloitte West Africa, Mr. Olumide. So thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers as well.